Welcome back to the One Soccer Nation podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Rae. Today's guest is Santiago Cadavid. Santiago specializes in international transfers, FIFA regulatory mechanisms, club acquisitions, and sports litigation. He is currently the director of sports law and litigation in the law firm 1350, and is also the head of legal at Envigado Fútbol Club in Colombia, one of the most respected youth development clubs worldwide and the training ground of global stars like James Rodríguez, who played at Real Madrid, Jhon Durán, Yasser Asprilla, Juan Fernando Corantoro, among many others. This conversation matters for everyone interested in the business behind soccer, and especially for investors and operators who want to understand how global football really generates returns beyond matchday revenue and media rights. Santiago, thanks for taking the time for being on the podcast.
Hello, Kareem. Thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan, so I'm really, really glad to be here.
Starting off with the first question, Envigado is globally recognized as a training club. For investors listening, what does that actually mean in financial terms? And how does a development first model generate sustainable revenue?
Well, it is important to note, Kareem, that in the football business and beforehand, let me do this disclaimer because I will be using soccer and football undistinctly, but it's the same. So, in terms of the football business, it's important to take into account that the the transfer of players, is one of the most important source of revenue that exists, right? It's something really particular in football. So when you focus on development, you players, what you're doing in terms of business is developing your own assets, right? I'm not saying that a human being is an asset, is not how it works, but is that the fact of have registered those players, that right to register players is what you are going to transfer in the future. So if you develop really good players with good performance, with high talent, so that will means a very high value transfer and really high transfer fees in future transactions. So that compared with the training cost means a high margin in terms of the economical equation. It is not the same that maybe you pay for having a player from another club, and instead, like, you develop that player. Obviously, those training costs, I'm not gonna say that are low. Of course, that's as well a big investment, but the margin will increase if you develop your own asset and then you transfer it. So that's why it is important, and it's a interesting bet in terms of investment, because you can make really good money, because we're talking about the transfer fees of a future transfer, of a future transaction, and then how the system actually works. You can keep a right from another future transfer from that player, what is called a sell-on fee. Let's put in an example. So I'm Club A, I transfer a player to Club B. So I agree with the Club B that when they transfer the player to Club C, I will receive, let's say, 20% of what Club C plays to the Club B. So that sell-on fee, in the case of that example, that 20% sometimes could be even higher than the first fixed fee that was paid to Club A. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it is important. And the other thing is that in the FIFA regulatory landscape, where there are two important elements that are training rewards to training clubs, that are called training compensation and solidarity mechanism. And especially this last one could be important passive income for your club. So that's why it is important to aim to have young players, develop, because that means develop your own assets and have an important revenue in terms of those transfers.
Absolutely. You're now based in United States and California, and transfer fees is still something that is growing in the MLS. I mean, we have Inter Miami has gone Leo Messi, Suarez, Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba, some big superstars, former Barcelona players in Spain. Um, Player like Son that was playing in the English Premier League for Spurs, now playing down in LA. Um, and another big player, Mular from Bayern Munich, Germany, World Cup winner, now playing in Vancouver in the MLS. So, in regards to player transfer market, is still growing in the US versus across the pond in Europe. Transfer players can be transferred all the way from a million all the way upwards to $100 million plus. So, in your perspective, what are your thoughts on the transfer market currently in the US? Obviously the MLS and the USL.
No, the U.S. market has been like is doing really really good right now, and from the past years, and is right now one of the best platforms to launch players to the European market. For example, from South America, let's put the case of Jader Durán, one of the players that you mentioned in the introduction. So he was trained in Envigado. So from Envigado, he became professional in Envigado. And then Envigado transferred him a few years ago, like 4 years ago, directly to the MLS to play for Chicago Fire. He did pretty well, and then he was transferred to Aston Villa to the Premier League, the top league in the world. So the US market nowadays are seen as one of the important platforms for the European clubs to import players, because back in the old days, at least from the South American perspective, let's say that Brazil and Argentina were those kind of exclusive platforms for a player to be seen in the European market. Now that's been growing a lot, and the MLS particularly is now that kind of good platform. So you're doing really good, and a lot of clubs are interested right now in having direct relationship with clubs from the MLS. Actually, a lot of clubs from the MLS they have scouting departments, and in South America, in many parts from the world, because they are seen as well a good business throughout it. So yeah, absolutely right in what cool means for the football market, the MLS nowadays. Absolutely.
Understood. I mean, so last year we had the FIFA Club World Cup 2025. This year's 2026 we have the FIFA World Cup hosted by Canada, US, and Mexico. In 2028 we have the US Olympics in LA. So more soccer being played, and then potentially 2031 a Women's World Cup happening in the US. So what are your thoughts on, you know, soccer growing in the US, and what does that mean for investors? What are you seeing there?
Well, first of all, what I have to say is that's very good for the market, is good for the environment. However, even with those events being held in the United States territory, it's hard to compete with the traditional sports. It's hard to compete with American football, with the NBA. Soccer still has a lot of room to be to be at that level, or at least close to it. However, However, in terms of investors, obviously it's important that the country uh, like improve the culture in terms of the sports, that understand the sport better. But in that sense, however, the investors that play a very important role today in the football business and in the market are from the US. So it's not necessary, like strictly necessary, at least from my point of view, that soccer becomes more popular in the US to have investors interested in the football market. Because now the money that comes from the United States are leading investments in the football market right now. If you see the economic groups, of multi-club ownership groups, most of them, the vast majority, are funded by U.S. investors. So that's our reality, and that's good in terms of the business. And in terms of what you said, obviously, and from my point of view, it's good that the U.S. market is start to understand better what soccer means, and the youth people start to see in soccer also a good sport to watch and to be entertained with it. Like I say, it's still a long road, but you are improving and do it really, really well. And in women's football, you are leading right now. So those are high achievements in terms of give the soccer a better spot embedded in the US culture as well.
Understood. Just to go back a little bit and follow up on player transfer markets, um, how should investors think about youth development as an asset class rather than an expense, to be very specific?
Well, mm, the first thing is not just an expense. That's the investment itself. It's all about change the mindset and understand that with patience, with the proper focus, with the proper tools to develop that young talent, so you will reach future but very important source of revenues, right? So it's kind of understand that maybe it's going to be something projected to maybe 5 years, even 10 years, because you start that development process. Let's say that could start from players being 10 years old, 12 years old, so you need to be patient, and with a strong statistic that exists in football is that just 1% of the players that compete to being professionals actually become professional. So that's a minimum, a vast minimum. But on the other hand, just with one player that has an important success in terms of visibility, that plays for big clubs, if you train a good player that then will play for big clubs or will represent the national team, just what when with one player that you can reach, that will increase a lot your goodwill as a training club. So for me, if you have the patience for it, it's worth it completely, right? Because as we say, you will participate in future transfer, then sell on fees. And let me point out what training compensation and solidarity mechanism is all about, because this is often misunderstood. But as I say before, those are training rewards, are rewards that exist in the FIFA regulations. So one is the training compensations that has two trigger events. The first one is when a player is registered as a professional for the first time in his career. or in their career. I say his because the training compensation right now is just exist for men's football. It still is not implemented in women's football. So when a player is registered as a professional in the FIFA framework, in the football framework, the players just have two status. You could be or just amateur or professional. So when you turn to professional, at latest at the calendar year of your 23rd birthday, that club that signs you as a professional and register you as a professional will have to pay to all those clubs with which the player has been registered before, according to the player background, in an international dimension. So let's break it down with an example. Let's say that a Colombian club had registered a player between the ages of his birthday 13 and the birthday 16. So he becomes professional at the age of 21 in a Spanish club. So Colombian training club, Spanish club, there is the international dimension. So that Spanish club will have to pay to that Colombian club an amount of money that is calculated according to the FIFA regulations. And that could be a very important amount of money, right? So, and then for the next transfer as a professional, that Spanish club will have to pay as well, but just to the last club, to the former club, an amount of money. But there is the other, even more important as a passive income, that is solidarity mechanism. That is for all the paid transfer, for all the transfer made over a player through the payment of a sum of money. So the buying club will withhold a 5% of that fee that is agreed, for example, in a transfer agreement, and that 5% will be distributed between all the clubs with which the player has been registered between the calendar year of their 12th birthday up to the 23rd birthday, independent on what is the age of the player. So for putting another example, James Rodríguez, he was trained in Envigado. He left the club 18 years ago. However, Envigado is about to receive some money from one of his last transfer, from the transfer from Rayo Vallecano in Spain to León in Mexico. León paid something, so Envigado, as exists in James Rodríguez's background, will receive a money, even 18 years after he was in the club. So that's why it's important, and that's when I talk about the passive income, and that's why it's important to have youth players in those training ages from the 12th birthday until the 23rd birthday. In training, compensations are just recognized the clubs between that had the player registered between the age of his 12th birthday until the 21st birthday, right? But in solidarity mechanism, it still recognizes those clubs that have the player until their 23rd birthday. So that's why it is important. And solidarity mechanism exists for all the players' career, because in training compensation, when the players turns 24 years old, disappear, but the solidarity mechanism maintain. So sorry if I extended too much, but it's important to highlight why it is important to invest. Those are the rewards, are never insured. This is a high risk business, of course, but completely worth it if you do it in the proper way and if you have the patience to start that kind of project and investments over a clock.
Thank you for sharing that, Santiago. That was very insightful. Um, I'm learning here. A question that I have, I just want to make sure that I understand. So is it that Envigado, the club, receives a residual income every time, only when that player, James Rodríguez, is transferred only. Is that right?
Yeah, when there is a paid transfer, because a player could change clubs without any payment between it, right? The players can be signed as free agents without the need to negotiate with any previous club. But when there is a negotiation, there is a transaction, there is a payment uh, for that transfer, all the clubs that had that player registered between those ages, the 12th birthday and the 23rd birthday, the calendar year of those birthday, they will receive a sum of money until the player retires. So that's the same example with all of those that you mentioned before: Juan Fernando Quintero, Jader Asprilla, Jhon, Jader, Durán. The case of Jhon, Jader, Durán, that is one of the most recent cases, is very illustrative, because what Envigado has received in terms of sell-on fees and solidarity mechanism is right now, and is still having money pending to pay, but with what has been paid to this date, that is higher than the first transfer fee agreed with the MLS to play in Chicago Fire. So just to give you an example on how important this is, and how develop youth players with good conditions uh, in terms of business and return of investment, could be very valuable.
Understood. Have you seen cases where clubs failed to properly claim solidarity payments and left money on the table?
Yeah, sure. And that's a good question, Kareem, because uh, right now, and this was implemented by FIFA 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, because at the beginning, if a club wanted to claim solidarity mechanism, for example, so that club needed to be aware of their players' movement, uh, players that those clubs had registered in the past, and be aware of the new movements. So sometimes, uh, you like, or those clubs never knew about those players' futures and outcome and futures transfer. And according to the FIFA regulations, if you want to file a claim before, in this case, before the FIFA dispute resolution chamber, you just have 2 years to do it. That's how works the statute of limitation in the FIFA regulation according to the procedural rules. So, according to FIFA stats, 80% of solidarity mechanism that was actually generated and triggered wasn't claimed, because clubs was never aware of it. So that's why FIFA created the FIFA Clearing House, that is a system, but also is a financial institution incorporated in Paris, in France, according to the European regulation. So it's working as a clearing house, so the club that has to pay the solidarity mechanism or training compensation doesn't pay directly to the clubs that will benefit from it. Instead, they pay to the clearinghouse after all a process to onboard to that clearinghouse, and then the clearinghouse allocate those payments to the training clubs. So FIFA ensure with this system that all the solidarity mechanism, training compensation that is triggered all over the world, uh, is actually like could be actually paid. So that's a new whole system. It's still hard to understand for someone that maybe that don't have this kind of contact with a club. But for me, as with my experience that I have to deal with this almost every day, I consider that is very important and is actually working. Still with a few gaps, but FIFA automatically calculate those claims or those rights. How is the solidarity mechanism to allocate? All that process is done by FIFA, almost by FIFA. So it's working very well. So that's why FIFA incorporate that new system and payment system, because a lot of those payments were lost.
Understood. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it always, I mean, improving the system is always key. With saying that, from your perspective as head of legal at Envigado, what has been the most eye-opening lesson about how global football business truly works behind the scenes?
Uh, Good question. From my overall experience, for me, the most eye-opening lesson would be the fact of understand where is the real and ultimate decision making power, because um, most of the times those public faces that you see are not the ones who really take decisions and make decisions. So is not on the CEOs normally, unless they are club owners as well. But we have investors, club owners that you never seen, players, agents, even the player has a strong power sometimes. The player relatives as well, sometimes they have a strong influence on a transaction. So it's essential to understand that this is industry. In this industry, you can be naive, and you need to understand how things work behind scenes. So for me, that's one of the most eye-opening lessons. Understand where the real decision-making power resides. And I, for mentioned example, is in the owners, external advisors, people that you don't see often, but those are the ones.
Got it. Has there been a specific transfer or dispute that changed how you think about risk in the industry?
Not necessarily a transfer, maybe, but let's say, for put an example on the table, and doping matters. I also work representing athletes in doping cases, and that's a huge deal, because just for a mistake that an athlete can make, taking something that he wasn't allowed to do it, but just for lack of knowledge, not for the intention to have any kind of advantage. So you can have your career suspended 1 year, 2 years, and that means your career is over most of the times. And that could have an impact as well in the investment, right? Because if you have a good player, one of your top players in your team that is involved in a disciplinary matter like this, as doping, and he or she will be suspended for 1 year, 2 years. That means that your investment is losing a lot of value, just for that, just for a fact that you can't even control most of the times. So I can put a lot of examples, or when you are about to close a deal and a player gets injured, things that unfortunately happens in the last minute, things like that. But it's always, sorry, um, something very, it's a powerful reminder of how things can change really quick, and you always have to keep a space, and have room to be surprised.
Yeah, that's that's a good point always having room to being surprised. You never sometimes you don't know what to expect per se. Um, with saying that, I want to switch gears here. again, you're now based in California and seeing U.S. capital flow into global soccer. Where do you think American investors misunderstand the football business model?
I don't know if the word is misunderstand, but yeah, there are some things hard to understand how this business really works. Because if I see the U.S. Sports ecosystem with the franchise system and closed leagues, no relegation, no promotion, relatively ensure revenues for TV rights and sponsorships. But then when you go to the European model, European South American model, that you will encounter uh, promotion, relegations. So what a promotion means that you lose visibility, sponsorship deals, a lot of income just for an sporting performance fact. That doesn't exist in the US conception of sport. And the fact or transfer of players, because there is no draft, there is no any other way to compensate the market and compensate the quality of the squads to compete. That doesn't exist in the European model. So when you start to realize that, maybe those are the kind of things and the kind of point that for an investor, for an investor will be hard to understand, but that's when our role as advisors come to light and to explain, to help to have a better understanding and how careful you should be in terms of do any type of business. So for me, those could be among many other examples of one of the things that could mean a very to learning the hard in the hard way sometimes. Yeah, for U.S. investors.
Got it. Right, Santiago. Right now, I'm quite biased towards the U.S. market. I've spent many years, 6 years specifically, building the podcast online. I would say majority of the individuals that I have are American based, US based. But we're international. We've had people from all over Dubai, Saudi, England, Ireland, everywhere. Um, and on besides from the podcast side, on our private side in regards to soccer investment and launching professional soccer teams. Again, I'm quite biased towards the US again. Specifically, as of right now, the USL League. We built a great relationship with USL. So my perspective on the US market is it's a different beast, right? There's nowhere around in the world that has two first division men's league, and same thing on the women's league, two first division women's league, right? So on the men's, you got MLS, and then potentially in 2028, you got USL Premier League, which USL has announced publicly. And then on the women's side, you already have the NWSL, National Women's Soccer League, and then you have the USL Super League, United States, United Soccer League, Super League. Sorry, I don't know why I said United States. Anyways, so it's a different beast. There's nowhere around the world that has that structure. It just doesn't exist. So that to me, it shows like the market is massive. I mean, there's so much space to continue launching pro teams in these different leagues. Um, as well as, I mean, USL is super unique in regards to having both a professional men's league, USL One, USL Championship, and soon to be USL Premier, and then same thing on the women's side, USL Super League, both pro men's and women's under one league. So that doesn't exist anywhere around the world either. With saying that, again, I'm biased towards the US market. I think it's a super cool opportunity where investors can come in, buy their way into the top of the pyramid, and start their club from scratch if they're going into a brand new market. Pick their name, create their logo, get the community involved in that process as well, and potentially do a big project like a mixed use development project on 100 acres plus of land. And create a village, right? And bring the community together. So again, to close off, I'm biased towards the US, but learning about other markets like Australia, the opportunity there. But there are other investment opportunities, as we know that US investors go outside of the US and invest in other markets for other reasons like pro-rel, etc. What is your perspective? I mean, if an investor says, "Hey, Santiago, I have I have 5 to 20 million I'm willing to allocate into soccer or football. Where should I go with this capital?" What would you say?
With what you say beforehand, that I completely agree on the different beast. And I consider that this is a back and forth learning process. You say that FIFA is getting close to the United States with the FIFA Club World Cup, then with the World Cup. And that's because football, soccer needs to learn from the US perspective in terms of business model, in terms of revenue, in terms of the entertainment that is all around the sport. But as well, I truly believe that the U.S. market, the in soccer, needs to learn from that European model. And what, for example, USL is going to implement with three leagues connected by promotion and relegation. That's going to be a huge opportunity. And for me, an excellent way to mix up, like have the best of both worlds. The FIFA conception of the sporting merits. If you do good, you can be promoted. If you do really bad, you must be relegated. But as well, surrounded by this atmosphere of the US market and entertainment and business model that is really strong. So I have a lot of faith on that project, and for investors and for everyone that's interested in soccer, that's for sure is going to be a huge opportunity in all sense, in all sense. On the other hand, well, that is a relative question, because the first thing to understand for an investor is, okay, one thing is what type of investor I want to be. I want to get involved in the club management, in the club administration. I want to be present in the club's daily basis or not. Or I just want to put some money on the table, make sure that is proper and well managed, and just wait for my return while I am on the beach, maybe, or hanging around without having a stressful day. You know, that's the first thing. What type of investor you want to be? And depending on that question, then the second question is, what is the amount of pressure that you are willing to take? Because it's not the same to invest or own a very traditional club, or a club with a big background, very winner, with a lot of titles, with a big fan base, because that's the other thing and makes football different is the emotional attachment that the fan base has over the football team. So that feeling and that love from people to the football team is really strong. Is really strong. But that means take a lot of pressure, a lot of people from outside demanding things, because football fans most of the times thinks that they are the club's owners, no, and you have to respect that. Or on the other hand, you will aim to a club that maybe is a mid-sized club or a small club, a small town, not much pressure, more patience to do things, to develop projects. So less pressure is also less visibility, but more visibility is higher pressure. So you always have to be located maybe in a mid range. But yeah, depends 100% for me in those questions. The type of investor that you want to be and the amount of pressure that you are willing to take and that you can really support on your shoulders. If you ask me to answer to properly answer your questions, at least for a rookie investor or someone that is not really into football, I would rather to choose a small mid-sized club, not with a high fan base, that you have a good margin to do things in your way, in your own way, and don't be surprised or maybe very angry fans and media pressure and a lot of things that for sure would be overwhelming for someone or for anyone that is not really into the sport.
Understood. Switching gears, if you're conducting due diligence on a club acquisition, what are the 5 most critical legal and structural items you would examine first?
Excellent questions, Karim. So the first, for me, the first thing is that understand that a club must be analyzed as any other company, because unless we're talking about clubs inside a non-profit organizations, um, football clubs are companies, So a standard due diligence always applies. So a core corporate review of financial statements, liabilities, the tax exposure, pending litigation, and the compliance of employment obligation, budget. One very important thing is get to know properly who the owners are, because you have to ensure at all costs that you are not doing business with someone that actually has or could have legal issues in the future. You don't want that, because you need to be strict in terms of compliant policies, avoid all risk in terms of money laundering and all what is surrounding by that. And that's one very important thing. What you will do with any other company. Then, speaking about the football specific review, so the player contract portfolio, as we say before, the fact or having a contract with a player, they have a player registered through a contract. That's the asset. That's the asset, because that's what you are going to transfer. Then the possibility to end that contract because that player is going to another club, that's what you are selling as selling club. So the squad valuation, obviously the wage structure, how the wages in the employment contracts are structured, the youth academy pipeline as well, um, what future transfer that club will have in the future, sell-on process, solidarity mechanism, what kind of future rights that club would be benefit from, and infrastructure, what kind of facilities, training facilities, headquarters, and one very important thing that also applies to any other company is the regulatory matters in the local jurisdiction. You need to be very aware of the country where you are doing business, how stable it is, how safe it is in terms to protect your investment, right? Because, for example, if you are in a country that you have the risk that from one day to another, the government is going to create a new tax for all the companies. And in terms of the policy, you need to assess as well the political and financial situation of that country, because all that regulatory weight is going to be or is going to affect as well to your club, because you are here, we are talking about comply with the sporting regulatory matters, but as well to the national laws. So you are always surrounded by different kind of regulations, and so it's important to make sure that the local regulation is compatible with the way you want to do business and what kind of investment vehicles allow you to incorporate in terms to conduct your investment. So I think I say more than five, but those are essentials to me.
Yeah. No, those are great points. I think that political piece caught me too in regards to, I mean, look, if we look at what's going on in Mexico right now, will Mexico still be hosting the World Cup with US and Canada? I mean, with everything that's going on with the cartel in Mexico. So it's that's many great points. Um, but sometimes there are things out of control that people can't control, which sucks. So it's going to be interesting to see if Mexico is going to still be hosting the World Cup. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's kind of hard. What's happening that maybe is understood as a high risk matter in terms of public safety. I hope that they can solve that because for me it will be very dangerous for everyone that be there if you don't get to a prompt solution to it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there's there's not much time. I mean, we're in February going on to March. So March, April, May, June. There's 4 months. So it's uh
Yeah,
it's a
and
good
it's
amount
hard
of
to
time,
change
but not a lot.
logistics. Yeah, it's kind of hard. Yeah, pretty bad situation. Like all my best to Mexican people to in that situation. Absolutely.
Yeah. You were gonna San Diego, you were gonna say something about like just changing logistics and the work that has to go in now with FIFA. Do you want to touch on that?
No, that's a really technical question. I mean, change logistics in terms of a World Cup. That's something that is planified for many years, and you just say, just change it like just missing 4 months to the World Cup, something like that is close to impossible because there's a lot of things previously arranged, and just say right now let's do other thing is hard. So for me, completely worth the effort to maintain uh, the things as initially were supposed to be.
Yeah. There's a growing narrative that football clubs are trophy assets for prestige rather than true financial vehicles. Do you agree, or do you believe disciplined operators can consistently generate returns?
I believe in the second, but also we have cases where you see club owners that they have a lot of money, so they don't care if the club generates profit or not. They simply don't care. And those clubs are often like a toy for them. Maybe it's kind of such a big word, but is for me the best way to describe it in here. In the good way or in a bad way, because you can have an unlimited cash here to hire and contract good players and have big amounts of money to spend. When you are passionate about it, there's a lot of club owners that are very passionate about it, so they spend money uh, without expecting any kind of close profit. That's respectable, but that also could be in the bad way, right? Because at some point, the owner's will could start to crush with the traditions and what with the people expectations, and that that that's the kind of thing that could end really bad. However, I do believe, as I said before, this is a medium high risk investment because there's a lot of things, a lot of factors that you can't control. It's a very wide world, but if you do things properly with a good structure, surrounded by experts, by good people, by a good accountant, by a good lawyer, by a good sporting directors that helps you to contract properly, good scouting. If you do things well, you increase the probabilities to have a successful business. So I truly believe in that second way on the things without like unrecognized that club as a trophy for the owner is also a case, and we have cases.
Understood. Okay, so Santiago, you're joining us fresh off the FIFA Football Law Annual Review in Budapest. As a FIFA licensed agent, you're right at the center of these regulatory discussions. For those who may not be familiar, what is this event and why does it matter for agents, clubs, and players?
Sure. Yeah, that's an annual conference organized by FIFA every year since 2019. And it's a very insightful space and scenario to discuss about trending topics in terms of football regulations. So you have very interesting lectures from people from all over the world, and of course it's an opportunity to reunite with your friends or professors, meet new colleagues, and expand your networking for all purposes. So yes, it's nice to be there, and always be updated and discussing about FIFA next moves in terms of regulatory matters. This year was in Budapest, beautiful city, and was interesting. Not many updates talking about regulatory matters. We will expect new agent regulations, and maybe one thing that we can highlight that will affect the whole football ecosystem is the final version of the Article 17 on the rules on the status and transfer of players. That is the main FIFA regulations about player transfers, the player's contract, and all what it is related to it. Right now, the Article 17, we are right now in an interim framework, because um, because of a decision of the European Court. One of those regulations had to be changed because, in the point of view of the court, those regulations were against the principles of the European Union. So FIFA had to refine it a little bit and did some changes, but as an interim way. So right now, FIFA is in a consultation process from all the football stakeholders and receiving ideas of that final drafting that could be aligned with FIFA principles, but as well aligned with the European Union policies. So that was announced to be released on June 30 this year. So let's see how it goes because, as I say, that's an article and that's a regulation that affects very deeply uh, the ways to draft contracts and manage contract and terminate contract and the consequences of breach of contract, etc. So yeah, and then we had very interesting discussions about uh, that's a high trending topic from the past years. And this the multi club ownership. What the consequence, as we say before, that's a figure that is seen every time more in the football business. Investment groups that owns clubs in different parts of the world. So that can have many issues in terms of the integrity of the competitions, integrity of the sports, a lot of regulations on it, but just from the perspective of the competitions. And you can see it in UEFA regulations, FIFA regulation that, for example, two clubs that belongs to the same multi-club ownership group can participate in the same competitions. Um, so what is understood as ownership, what is understood as a strong influence. So a lot of questions arise without answer, but definitely that's a concern for the football framework. And let's see how it goes in the future. Yeah.
Understood. All right, closing off with some fun questions, rapid fire. One metric every football
Sure.
investor should track.
Uh, Future rights in terms of sell-on fees, solidarity mechanism, the proper calculation and expectation of what a club that you are potentially will invest. That's key for me because those are hidden resources that you could receive, but some people like not they are not really or pretty aware of how they should be about that.
Development club or global brand club? If you had to pick one, which one would you choose?
Development club,
Most misunderstood revenue stream in football or soccer?
TV rights.
Biggest red flag in a club acquisition?
What I say before, I consider that you can't if you are not able to uh, get to know who are you doing business with, if they are not transparent about who are the owners and the beneficial owners and the source of the revenues, if you are not able to get that information, if you see that they are putting some obstacles in get that information, that's big red flag as a church.
Got it. And last one word to describe the future of soccer investments.
Exciting.
It's a good word. Santiago, this was a masterclass on the real economics of global football. Thank you for breaking down how training clubs, legal structure, and investor alignment shape long-term value. To everyone listening, if you're serious about understanding how professional soccer is built, financed, and scaled, make sure to subscribe and follow One Soccer Nation across all platforms. Until next time, let's keep growing the beautiful game. Thank you, Santiago.
Thanks for having me. See you around.